There we go. So I have the pleasure of introducing Ms. Lucie Santoro tonight. Ms. Santoro is Director of Administration, Communications, and Stakeholder Relations of the Martin Family Initiative. Pardon me for that. She will be presenting the goals and projects of the organization founded by former Prime Minister Paul Martin. The Martin Family Initiative, the MFI, works together with First Nations, Inuit, and Métis Nation people to support education, health, and overall well-being for children, youth, and adults. They believe everyone should have the opportunity to reach their full potential. Thank you so much, Ms. Santoro, for being with us tonight, and the floor is yours. Oh, unmute.
It's rare anyone has to tell me to unmute because I never shut up. Thank you so much for allowing me to speak tonight. As Susan mentioned, I handle all administrative issues as well, comms and stakeholder relations. And we really, we partner with people who share the same goals as us. And we definitely want to make sustainable changes, innovative changes for the Indigenous youth of our country. I'm sure Mr. Martin, when he spoke with you, probably mentioned how it all started. The MFI, it started back in 2008, and please stop me if I'm repeating, because I don't want to repeat and bore you, because I was going to focus on something else as well, on the type of partnership and all that, how that things work. That's what Mr. Shepherd spoke to me about. So just a little bit of background about me. My CV has 2 words, and it's the name of Paul Martin. I've started very young with him, and now I'm on my 45th year working for him. Yes, so I started with him at Canada Steamship Lines, followed him politically, organized campaigns, went to the PMO, Minister of Finance, and now I was part of the inception in 2008 of the Martin Family Initiative. And so as you mentioned, Susan, we want to strengthen our relationships with all First Nations, Métis and Inuit. We want our programs to be sustainable. Each program has a different mission or goal. I'm going to start from the Model School Literacy Project, which it's improving reading and writing. And that's where we teach the teachers how to teach with a focus on literacy. And the program is really for young students from kindergarten to grade 3. And we started off with 2 pilot projects, and which were very successful. We surpassed the average of the Ontario provincial results. From the Ontario one was 70, and we were at 81% success rate. And we calculate the success rate is basically saying, well, these kids have never been tested or anything, and the teachers, may never have taught reading or writing. And so we train these teachers, and that we read to the students, we share books, we also create libraries within the schools, the First Nation schools. Our partnership is mainly with the First Nations, their Director of Education who controls all this. And thus far we're in 18 schools. It was incremental, and we started with the 2 pilots. It was successful. Like any other program, we pilot every program. We learn from our mistakes. We can fix mistakes. We're not in government, so mistakes are definitely, and why we always seek, comments from everyone telling us where we could improve, both from the administration of the schools or even from students when they're of age, of course. So the literacy project is a long time going, and we're just improving now in terms of sustainability for those who started off the first 6, then we had another 6, and then we had another 6 to make it 18, plus the 2 pilots, which was 20. It's a partnership with the federal government who helps us fund this program. And thus far, it's very successful. And we see the results coming every year, including this year where there was some interruptions, and we tried to, at least some schools were able to operate, so we increased the number of books so we can share with them. We increased training, and so that things would be, somewhat similar to what we're used to. There's another program who's more recent, which is the Early Years program. And I'm sure Mr. Martin gave you a description of this one, as well as the other one as well. But the Early Years is really, we have home visitors, which are Indigenous from the community. So we partner with the Education Department, the Health Department, and the First Nation Band Council for the Early Years, where we, when a young Indigenous mother, 14, 15, obviously may not have all kinds of support systems, we support them by these home visitors. For example, she's pregnant, she's going to keep the baby. The home visitor is a mother of her own. And she basically goes there on a weekly basis and visits with them and explain them. So don't forget your doctor's appointment that you have. Don't forget you have to take vitamins while you're pregnant, or any other things that they need. Could be food, could be anything. And they're the key to the success of the program, these visitors. So the first 2 years of this Early Years project is really focusing on the mother. Then 2 to 4 is where the focus is on the child's development, how the brain forms. We look at if the mother had some addictions, for example, how that can influence the child. It's basically to make sure the child could be ready for kindergarten. So that we started off with a pilot in Ermineskin, Alberta. So it's near Edmonton. And we have now gone to Yukon, the BC, so we're expanding quite fully. And that too, during the pandemic, we were able to also support locally even though they were not related to the program, or whatever needs the community had. So we were able to play a role there. The other program where there's the one that maybe might be interest from the Rotary, I'm not sure if I understood correctly. It's the Aboriginal Youth Entrepreneurship Program. That was the first program ever started back in 2008. And again, piloting. And when Mr. Martin reached out to the Minister of Education in Ontario, whom he knew very well, he asked for someone he could speak to see how we can put this program into place, because we weren't reinventing entrepreneurship at all. But we wanted to see, in the context of an Indigenous population, how we could teach business. So with this, we chose a school in Northern Ontario, which is not on a reserve, but is a First Nation school. And the graduation rate there at that time was 3%. We're now at our 8th cohort, and their graduation rate is close to 80%. We don't claim to have the success to everything. We obviously want to empower youth to be able to make it on their own and to believe in themselves. Some of these, especially at that school, you had people that lived only in the bush, never even saw Thunder Bay, Ontario, where it was, and even a lamppost. So you can't expect miracles out of them, but there was a keen interest for them to learn about business. And plus they thought the class was fun. It's taught in the grade 11 and grade 12, in the rest of Canada, and 10 and 11 in Quebec. So we're in over 50 schools across the country. We are now in 4 schools in Quebec, and expansion is going on again in Quebec. Basically, we train the teachers for 2 days when it's face-to-face. If not, we train online like we did during the pandemic. And the kids, after the first pilot, we asked them how they liked the course, what would they change, etc. And they came up to Mr. Martin and basically told him that the books were maybe good, but they could not see themselves reflected in it. And so we hired 2 teachers, Indigenous teachers, to write the books for us with an Indigenous context, with Indigenous examples. So we had entrepreneurs and teachers working together to be able for these kids to see themselves reflected. Now, obviously, if you're in First Nation out in Alberta, it might be different than a First Nation here in Quebec. Like the Cree will have one thing, for example, one reality of the type of businesses they have. In some other areas, they may have different businesses, but they're still run by entrepreneurs, to have these role models. The kids are really shy when you first meet them. They haven't had much success in having that family support. And we found that with these books, grade 11 and grade 12 books, there was a student book and a teacher's guide to how to teach the course. So everything is in there, even and to be able to teach it. And it's done, for example, I'll give you an example of what they have: a gift basket activity. And it could be, for example, you're going to create your business plan in grade 11, and then you're actually going to implement your business plan in grade 12. There's no tests in the course. Excuse me. And we have mentors that come and help to develop their idea for this business. Excuse me, I'm just gonna take some water, excuse me. I'm so sorry about that. And at the beginning, we were basically told, well, how are you, Martin Family Initiative, going to be able to portray this Indigenous reality? Well, through the businesses, the kids brought their culture and traditions they taught us, plus we did the research and writing the books. And with these books, the program just took off. It's been a great success. There's much more that we'd like to do, of course. Supplements also to this program were on tourism, because there's industries, depending where they are, that might be, some students might be interested in creating a business in the tourism industry. We are looking at producing food supplements right now. And which would basically have the food safety, looking at that and what you need to do in terms of a restaurant business. So the student would take the full course regularly, entrepreneurship. But if someone wanted to go into tourism, they would do 13 lessons from the book and then go like for tourism or food supplement or whatever. And we have programs in mentoring, in both an accounting mentorship and legal mentorship. They've been going on for years. And this is for students who are probably planning to go to university, because our main goal is to decrease the dropout rate and increase the potential of them succeeding in life. And one thing we've noticed also since hiring, I remember one of my first presentations where I was asked, how do you measure success? And we weren't many years into the Martin Family Initiative. And it was very hard because, for example, if we take these students who are the older age, we can't really say, oh, well, for sure, after they took our course, they're going to graduate 100%, because they have to have all the other courses, the core courses they need to take. And we might be able to give them the route for them to succeed and the tools. And then later, maybe they can make it, but we don't know, like 20 years down the road, what happens if they go to university or not. We would love to have that information, but however, due to the privacy issues and the laws, we cannot have access to the students. And schools, high schools don't even keep information on where they go after high school. Needless to say that in most of our programs, we've had a lot of success with these students because, you have businesses. One student started a lawnmower business, and on his own, he hired people. And we basically, if they start a business, we're talking about micro enterprise right now here. We're talking about $500. We're not talking about major money here, but it's just to get them started. And so I went to that. I went to mentorship. Sorry, mentoring is the CPA. We have a partnership with CPA Canada, who their firms have volunteers who mentor the kids. We have legal mentorship, which is a partnership with McCarthy Tetro, which does exactly the same thing. You don't have to become a lawyer or an accountant, but it's basically to get you to know more about business and, you know, what it is, what an accountant does. You get exposed to businesses that exist out there. You go visit and learn, for example, like a bank or, you know, an accounting firm, legal firm, etc. We have a First Nations principles course. In many public sector, I should say the provincial curriculums, they don't, if you're on reserve, it's the feds who are responsible for you. If you're provincially, it's the province. So the province, if you learn to be a principal, you have all the tools you want. You can call another member of a school board and find out how things work, and you can get, you know, how did you deal with such a situation, etc. But that doesn't exist for principals on a reserve. So we worked with OISE and we worked with 13 members of that were Indigenous educators, experts from different provinces, and we developed a program with them. That's our main, one of our main issues, as well as we work with people, is that we don't go there and say, okay, here we know it all and let's do it. Some of them thought that we would just present them with a program and they would rubber stamp it. And it's not that, is that we wrote it with them so that they would give us their expertise and all this, and you know, who have been principals as well. And basically, it's not just the administration of the school, but it's also how you deal with situations, a difficult parent, a child that's not performing, and how do you tell the parent who won't accept it, different issues. And it's great also for a principal to be able to support the teacher in what they're teaching. So they're very crucial. And so we have about 20 people. I think it's our 4th cohort now that it's taught online. Again, no exams, but it creates a network of where people can actually reach out to one another and see where we can, how they can deal with a situation. We will be, we piloted a program in terms of the food sustainability program. That is greenhouses, how to grow crops. Like in some areas, it's very difficult. There's not fresh vegetables. They have to be imported into these First Nation communities. So we started a program in Isle La Crosse in Saskatchewan. The teacher was teaching the youth entrepreneurship program, and she decided to use as a class project rather than having individual projects about greenhouse, how you can grow your own food, and you know, the different vegetables either through hydroponics or underground. So they had a combination of growth, and it was a success there. The community got all involved, and they were able to, during the pandemic, to obviously grow these vegetables, but not only feed their own community of Isle La Crosse, but the 5 other communities around them. So based on that success, we're trying to expand that program into different places. We're looking Northwest Territories, we're looking in Alberta, different areas to see how that works and improve also as we learn. We also have piloted, but we couldn't finish everything because of the pandemic, a financial literacy program for adults. Because in some, if I go back for a while, there was a First Nation chief who called our office and said, we're out of the red in our books, but we'd like to tell our people now that we're out of the red, and we'd like to explain what we're going to do with the money. And so what happened was that he later learned that they weren't literate, so they couldn't even understand the you know, let alone reading, but even the numbers. So we were asked by chiefs to create such a program. So we partnered with the Financial Consumer Agency and the local 7 Generations Institute in Brantford, Ontario, who will teach the course. But as I mentioned, we were in a pilot, so we're trying to move on. I think I've covered all of them. Any questions so far? Because I said so much information.
I've got one, if I may, Lucie.
Yes.
The one that particularly interests me was when you talk about the greenhouses.
Yes.
I know that there's a company in Quebec called, I believe it's called Ferme d'Hiver, Winter
Yes.
Farms.
Yeah.
And I believe that they have done a greenhouse. I think it's up in the Baie-Comeau area. I believe it's on a, I don't know if it's on a reservation, but if I'm not mistaken, I think it's an Indigenous operation that they've built up there. And
you never heard of them?
it was something that I hadn't heard about either, but somebody told me about it a couple of weeks ago. And I'm just wondering is this the kind of thing, because we're looking at getting involved in some kind of an Indigenous project. Originally, we were talking about improving water quality.
Yes.
But the federal government has been working on it. Things take time, but they're more than halfway through that process, but then we thought, well, is there another way that you can help Indigenous people? And Mr. Martin, when he was speaking to us, mentioned two things. One was the greenhouses. Another one was the idea of wind energy or solar energy. I believe that there's a couple of places out in Alberta that are actually producing their own energy.
Yes, and he's also mentioning about Hydro-Quebec windmills.
Yes.
That.
So we've been looking at these ones, and in my idea, or my thought, I should say, is the wind farming or whatever may be out of our league in terms of cost and expertise. On the other hand, though, it's a number of us have been talking about the opportunity maybe to do greenhouse farming in the north, which is something that I think is scalable for us, and that we may be able to get involved in. And so we're looking at the idea of raising funds to do something like that, and then possibly finding a partner that will help raise more funds. Because I know like a greenhouse farm that would like take care of an area of maybe 3,000 to 4,000 people, we're probably looking in the $300,000 to $400,000 range, something like that, from what I've read. So we were thinking if there's a way for us to put in some seed money and then make that grow, because we can go out and we can get grants from Rotary. We can apply for grants from Rotary to match what we can raise, and then it's a question of finding a partner that can help us make this happen, can go out, get other parties involved, corporations or whatever, and to make this kind of thing happen. And we're looking more specifically within Quebec, northern Quebec, but that's the kind of thing that we would be interested in looking at.
Okay, so in terms of the greenhouse, the program itself will have education plus a greenhouse, but the greenhouse, if it doesn't happen, it's not a must. It's the community that they want to build a greenhouse. They got to. But we also want to educate the kids about good food, good eating habits. Growing is an important part, of course, but it goes with the community and depending what the needs are. Some may have installations already, but we also work with other partners who help us understand the greenhouse, as well as how to, we're trying to develop some resources for the education side of things in class for them to possibly protect it. Like in the adult center where we offered entrepreneurship in Ganawagi, for example, they had already a greenhouse, but they wanted to use, they had a chicken coop also, and then they decided they wanted to raise crops. And so they merged the two programs. And one of the kids, for example, was really in bad shape in terms of, he was often in jail, in and out, and didn't have much support at home, etc. So this hydroponic system that they chose to have, they were able to, this child was able to find a passion that he liked. And I mean, the guy was the spokesperson for this greenhouse in Ganawagi. So we are looking at the development of these resources also and working with the needs of the communities. But I will have, and if you would like, I could schedule also a call with the person who's responsible for our food sustainability program to take you in more details.
That would be great.
Yeah, sorry, who was speaking? Because I can't see the person.
Oh, you can't see me?
I've got it on the speaker view.
Oh,
and
okay.
I've got the Lucie spotlight.
Okay, no problem.
So who was speaking?
Actually, it's Jim Ferris.
Okay.
But you can send the stuff through Glenn. You got his
Yes,
coordinates.
I do.
So
Yeah.
any information you have, you can send it through Glenn, and he will definitely forward it to us. That'd be great. Because we think we're looking to do something that is viable, obviously, that will be not necessarily a commercial success, but a a financial success in terms of making it a worthwhile thing for a community to do. Presumably, I mean, I think automatically it's going to be run by local people. So it fits in, I think, with your entrepreneurship. It fits in with the education and everything else. So we're just not sure how we develop this or how we go about getting other partners to come in on it.
Okay.
We've got,
So-
sorry, Lucy.
Yeah,
We've
no,
got three questions. So Charles, and then Tom Burpee and Malcolm McRae. So Charles, you have a question?
My question is, I'm a physician who's been involved in the addiction problem for a number of years. And when I gave the University of Saskatchewan, the college I graduated from, 50th anniversary on addiction, I looked up what's happening in Canada and found that the Indigenous people, kids, had the highest incidence, as does in the States. I mean, it's not just Canada. And I'm wondering if you've run into that problem. And this is not pejorative, because addiction is not it's a bit of a disease, but it's not, it's not their fault.
No, that's right. But it stems from somewhere. We have seen and witnessed all that, but we don't deal directly with it to fix addiction. It's we just take that into consideration in everything we do, because that will affect the result of the program. It's sort of but we don't necessarily work directly with it. Mental health comes into play well in terms of our early years program, for example, or anything on First Nation territory.
Well, good point.
Thank you. Thank you, Lucy. Tom Burpee.
Okay, Lucie, assuming students in grade 11 in Quebec or grade 12 the rest of the country, assuming they graduate and go to university, does that mean they will never come back to where they grew up?
Okay, so I think you're saying about the Indigenous students who study in an urban center, do they ever go back into their thing? So
Yeah.
I speak for the Cree. The Cree had a program that they wanted to, for their teachers. It was to professional development for their teachers, for example. And what happened is that they learned that these teachers would have preferred having the courses on site in their community because they missed home. So it does not mean that they never come back, but there's big will of going back to the community and trying to help there where there's, I mean, I would think even in the Inuit communities up north, it would be just horrible.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Malcolm?
Yes, Lucie. I found it, just to get an overview of how the bureaucracy of, like, where does your organization fit within the the education system of Canada? Like, how different is the education bureaucracy if you're on a reserve or if you're not on a reserve?
Okay.
Yeah.
It really stems, one, this is a question of underfunding that the feds over years, I'm just saying different governments, whether liberal, conservative, anybody. One, if let's say you have a school, which is about 5 kilometers away from a First Nation, First Nation reserve, what happens is that the teachers, the urban center, are paid way more and they're qualified because they have to do courses into university. Whereas on reserve, some of these teachers could be the chief's sister, may not have any experience in teaching and would do it. And there's the fact that their schools are not necessarily best because they don't, out of 603 communities across Canada, there may be 45, 50 high schools that might be able to offer these type of programs. And depending on the community, I mean, if they have, like, for example, an Inuit community where there's high suicide, education comes last. They don't even consider it. And so there is a difference of the funding. There's a difference of the professional development. And I'm not sure whether you know, but when the government, federal government transfers money for on reserve, the band council decides how they're going to split $100, for example. They split whether it goes five to education, 10 would go to health or whatever. They decide. Now, what we're trying to do is not to replace the education system. We actually work with the education system in terms of having the provinces approve our youth entrepreneurship course for credit for these students. So it's an elective course in terms of entrepreneurship, and they can get a credit. These kids on reserve, if they don't have a high school, they have to leave their community. And some of them just don't want to. And some,
Papers froze, Lucie.
sorry? Sorry, hello?
So, I'm not sure who spoke there.
It's okay, just keep going, Lucie, just a glitch.
Okay, sorry. So I was saying they don't have access to the type of education that everybody else has off reserve. It is a challenge in terms of even, you know, when you think of what the residential schools did in terms of education for these communities, the trust has to be built. I mean, now we're seeing a lot of the results.
So are
Yeah.
these reserve schools, they're funded by the federal government and
If you're on reserve, yes,
they're run by the reserve?
yes.
Ultimately.
Yeah.
And, okay, so they're not really part of the provincial system.
No, but in some cases though, for example, the Cree School Board, they're part of the James Bay Agreement. So it's a little bit different than everywhere else because not everybody had that agreement. But the Cree School Board gives the credits as the province of Quebec would. And they're a provincial board, but they have more funding available because they did, you know, because of their agreement they had. Whereas if you go to Kahnawake, for example, Kahnawake, they don't like, they would rather have Mohawk language, for example, be recognized and they give the credit rather than the province. They're working things out because their students lag behind if they haven't been exposed to other courses. You can't just be in the community and then try to go work outside of the community. And especially with near urban centers like they are, they're very close.
So the schools that your organization is, I don't want to use the term run, but they're involved.
Yeah.
What sort of percent of the population, I mean, is that 10th of all the reserve schools? Is it, like how
So
many?
our programs operate both on and off reserve. We have a lot more off reserve schools. And the way we select the students, for example, if it's at the school, is that, well, the teacher chooses the students, it's not us, but is that they have to be Indigenous. When there is, and this is a fact that we've been told, when there is 2 non-Indigenous, for example, and there's 8 Indigenous kids, the 2 non-Indigenous will take over and the non-Indigenous will just step back. It just happens. That's why we can't have, so, and we go to schools where they have a number of high population of Indigenous kids. Our education program director has mentioned to me that there's 80% of Indigenous population that study off reserve because of the lack of good education that they have on their in their community.
Okay.
Any
So I was wondering, like, does your organization represent a large group of the schooling in Canada, Indigenous, or is it just a small group that actually?
Well, no, we're a group that decided that education is the way to go.
No, but of the people who go to, of the Indigenous students, what percent would be involved in?
Oh my goodness.
Like just a small group, or?
We're probably smaller group because we're 50 schools. I'm sure there's a lot more than 50 schools across Canada.
Yeah.
Whether it's Indigenous kids or not in all these other schools, that's something our education program director tries to identify as we go along. Or sometimes people reach out to us.
Thank you, Lucie. I think Don McKinnon has a question, but Don, you are muted, so you'll have to unmute yourself. There you go. Okay.
I was
Go ahead.
curious whether or not your Martin's family experience is largely been out west. The examples you've given are majority are out west. Does that reflect some issue in dealing with Quebec,
Okay.
apart maybe from language, such that if we're thinking of projects to be successful, we really should be looking out west rather than in Quebec.
No, actually, no, but Quebec was last to join the group. And that was because Quebec does not have introductory to business, for example, at the high school level. We don't have the model school project in Quebec. Yeah, sorry, we do have one on Kanawagi. The early years program started out west because don't forget, Ontario has the largest population of Indigenous people, and out west also. Here in Quebec, we have the Inuit and we have First Nations also, but there's English and French. So we started our programs in French when the province agreed to recognize credits for these kids. Because we couldn't say out west, you're allowed to give credits because BC or Alberta or everybody recognizes the course, and not in Quebec. So Quebec was last because of, it wasn't necessarily the funding, it's that they didn't have intro to business. So how would you include it in a curriculum that they already have? And how they could recognize it. So I'll give you an example. The Cree School Board, I always go to them because they were successful in doing something that we wouldn't have imagined, because we can't ask them to do anything on curriculum. They added another year of 11 in order for the students to be able to take this extra course of entrepreneurship, because they wanted their kids to learn about business. And Quebec was slow to start because it took us time before, it actually took us about 6 years before we can actually get through to get the credits recognized. And obviously we want to bring all our programs under Quebec, and Quebec is actually one of our major places where we want to fully expand. In the fall, it will be the first time we will be offering the course in French, because all our books have been translated. The model school, for example, the literacy project, which is in Kanawagi in one of the grade schools, they are, it's English now, but if there's a request in French, there's definitely will. And we've identified locations, but given the pandemic, we couldn't even travel anywhere like Val d'Or, but to really, expand it in terms of Quebec. There's a university, University of Laval, who wants to also offer online the First Nations Principles course. So we're trying to work things out how it could be, and it would be French, so we have to translate. But definitely Quebec is a priority for us in all programs, wherever we.
Can I just add an addendum? In the general question, in the general feeling of environment, which we're moving into, I have a very good friend that's spent 10 years, he's just retired, with a fund of millions of dollars trying to work in the area of supporting innovation in Canada among the Indigenous people. Not so much in the Inuit communities, but others. And his biggest issue was getting agreement. And if I've understood his description of getting ideas in place in a community, is that by and large, most towns own property totally in community. There's no such thing as individual property. So any project that in any way impinges on the land of the community has to be agreed to by the community.
Yep.
And he has several examples that he's told me about where he worked several years with young men, they were men, wanting to start things in that village. For example, one was a good example of what I'm describing. He wanted to start a dairy farm
Mhm.
in an area not far remote from the basic white population on a reserve. And he couldn't get the village's agreement to give him title or identification of any land that would be his farm on which money would be lent. He actually moved his whole idea off the reservation, not far away, onto non-reservation land. And today he's a very, very successful milk farmer. And that's an example of the kind of cultural differences that we aren't aware of, that we should be aware of from, and maybe you have examples of it,
Well,
that, you know, would govern us on the kind of projects that we have a chance of succeeding on.
so
Thank you.
the way to, like, I'm not sure how your friend approached this. He already had an idea of a dairy farm and he wanted to put it on the reserve. Is that it?
No, he was working with individuals on he was working on basically right across Canada. I don't think he was in the Maritimes that much.
But was he on reserve or not on reserve?
He was a
He ended
white
up doing it off reserve, but
who had been given, in fact, up to millions of dollars to spend exclusively on entrepreneurship that he was able to identify. And
well,
he
I'm,
was successful. But
yeah, so they're, it's always very challenging, one, that they have their own timeline, the Indigenous people. If they, it depends if he went there with a program he already had in mind that was working elsewhere and whatever. If he
he
wanted,
had the money.
no, I know he had the money, but
But
it's,
he was saying, what do you see as possible? To the,
what did they say?
well, to the, he found within a village in out west, I think it might have been in Manitoba, this young man who wanted to start farming. He was early 20s and starting a family and so on. And he thought he could sell milk to the rest of the, you know, people in Manitoba. That's how that started.
I
And
see.
he worked with them for quite a while. And in fact, the young lad was successful. He's now got a very profitable and growing milk business, but he was barred from having that farm
I'm not too sure.
under his ownership or meeting any of the bank's requirements in terms of his responsibility for loans, you know, loan repayment. That none of those issues that's entrepreneurship for most people
Mhm.
did he succeed in getting permission from in the town, in the village, in the reservation.
Mhm.
You know, that's pretty fundamental.
It is.
Anybody, you know, thinking what's possible, you know.
Well, when we had our pilot project for the model school literacy, we had to deal, it was our first time dealing with signing an agreement of that nature with the First Nations band locally. And there was, you have to look at the question of, because we would be developing material, it was a question of who would own the intellectual property. Then it was, they put conditions in the sense, for example, like if you're about to publish the results of our kids, we need to approve first before you go. It is very, very challenging. And until they trust you, you're going to have all the barriers possible. They'll find barriers where there may not be. And that's why I was asking if your friend was, I mean, besides the money, did he go in with a program, one size fits all, or was he going to adapt something into the dairy, whatever you could? I mean, I don't know if he was going to build the dairy farm, or I'm not sure what he was doing. But if the band council does not want you, you can try everything.
Yeah.
They won't. It's just a challenge. We are having a lot more success because the trust was there. I mean, Mr. Martin was prime minister, so whether he was prime minister or anybody, it didn't matter because they wanted to make sure, okay, so you come here now, wanted to offer us these type of programs, what, you know, besides the money, what comes with it, right? And we had conditions, and obviously like anybody else, right? What, in terms of agreement. So that at first was challenging, but now it's fine, but we were lucky. But again, we work with the communities and find out first, like before we develop a program, Mr. Martin has a tendency of always wanting to check what are the needs of the communities. Like obviously we want our pan-Canadian programs. It's not just out west or just Quebec or whatever. We want pan-Canadian. And now each community has different needs. And for example, the Mohawks in Montreal can't stand the Mohawks in Cornwall. So there's all kinds of little, I keep on saying that there's politics 101, the one we know, and then there's the indigenous politics, which is incredible. And I don't want to be rude in any way because I have high respect for them, but their timeline is not always ours. Like if we want to have something within 6 months, it may take a year. But it's how to work with them. That's the only way.
Yes.
Lucie, thank you so much. If there are no, oh, we have Chris. Chris, you have a question. One last question.
Sure. And then if you
Chris?
would like to add something.
Yes, of course, Lucie. Chris, do you hear me? Your hand is raised.
I'm not sure that his audio is on. I don't think he got his audio sorted out.
Okay, all right. So we're going to have to forego a question from Chris. Lucie, thank you so very much, but you have some comments. Yes, please. Closing comments.
So when I was speaking with Glenn Shepherd, he mentioned to me also in terms of if there was an interest of partnering together, how would the partnership, what would it resemble to? So obviously we have agreements. Oh, I think Chris may have a hands up.
It's okay, Lucie, because he's having problems with his audio.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Okay, no
So
problem.
Please go ahead. Yeah.
So obviously we have an agreement. We would report in terms of any funding, we would report annually on the progress of the program or the, and also the how we spent the money. I don't know, I mean, we have like how we would use each other's logo, for example, those kind of things and terms. It depends what in our discussions, if you want to have a 1-year term, a 2-year term, depending. And we obviously want programs that are sustainable, like I mentioned, so it's very important. We did have a suggestion, however, in terms of if there's any interest, I know about the food sustainability program, but there was also another one, which depending also on what is involved in terms of any partnership, whether it be funding or elsewhere, there is the food supplement, which is a book that complements the regular books. I don't know, did Mr. Martin show you the books we had at the time that he spoke to you? Entrepreneurship program or anything? No way.
I don't think so, no.
Okay, so I'll try and see if I can send you a picture. And so that you would see what I'm talking about. And the food supplement, I think that would be one of the avenues that we saw. Obviously, we'll go with what your interest is and see how we can work from there. And that's where I was thinking, that's where we were thinking. So I'm not sure, I'm gonna leave it at that and see where that may be. We would also, you know, if there's examples of a success story within the program that we partnered with, for example, we definitely share that because it builds also to see firsthand how it's improved and what happened in the program with your help. I think that was about it. I don't know if there was any other issues in terms of what the partnership would look like.
Well, if there are, Lucie, we'll certainly circle back either by phone or email. So thank you so much. The breadth of your understanding is really, we appreciate it. And Jim has a couple more words of thanks, if you
Oh,
would.
sure.
Lucie, it's when we were speaking with Mr. Martin, he kind of introduced this whole concept to us. Thank you very much for coming today and giving us a little bit more insight into what's going on, and in particular some of the issues that you run into when you're dealing with the Indigenous people and trying to introduce these programs. Something that is a particular say delight for us is to know that Quebec is now becoming a stronger focus for your group, and I learned a lot today about how would you put it? I think the general population has an issue with, well, what can we do for the Indigenous people, and what do the Indigenous people want? And to me, you've made it clear that the Indigenous people want to be autonomous. They want to stay in their communities. They want to maintain their lifestyles, which is extremely important. And they simply need the opportunity and a little bit of help to get it going.
Absolutely. That's why we're there. We want to offer them, give them the tools to be able to succeed like anybody else.
Yeah. So for that and for clarifying that and bringing this a little bit closer to us, I thank you very, very much. And I'm sure we'll be definitely speaking to each other in the future.
No problem. And I will try and schedule for more details in terms of the food sustainability program. I try to schedule a call with the director, the person coordinating the whole program, so that in case you have other questions.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lucie. So we're going to move on to announcements, Lucie. So if you're most welcome to stay, but if you have to go, we will totally understand, and we'll progress with the rest of the meeting. We're going to stop the recording now, and thank you.